Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about theology in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, and the incredible work that was done in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, and some of the incredibly deep and powerful questions that are being asked about humanity's relationship with God that are answered by a bunch of coastal elites in Wizards of the Coast, and how they didn't get it all wrong, and that actually there's a lot of evidence that they did some deep thought, some emotional work, frankly some spiritual work to consider some of the deepest questions in all of theology, and you could see it right there in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Let's talk about this. All right, so I had a commenter recently. He's like, "Why do you keep talking about middle-aged white men?" And that's a very valid question. CCC. Okay, so I'm gonna very calmly, concisely, and clearly discuss why I talk about middle-aged white men when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. So, yeah, I'm concerned about it, right? So one, I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, if it's a good game, I don't care who built it," right? Well, here's the thing. So I am Basque and Native American, so I have a lot of sympathy for people of color who I do think have been kept out of the history of Dungeons and Dragons more than they should be. They've not been, exiled from the history of Dungeons and Dragons. But the reality is, there's just a history of middle-aged white men writing the rules and being the design leads and actually, one area, the D&D CEO, there has been no shortage of females there, right? But I get why people are like, "Oh, why has it got to be about gender? Why has it got to be about what color our skin is?" Well, the reality is people of color have really been on the outside, right? And I understand that people are like, "Oh, this doesn't matter," but when you say it doesn't matter, are you a middle-aged white man? If you are, like, maybe you really need to think a little more about that, right? So I'm trying to say this calmly, concisely, clearly. If gender and the color of your skin doesn't matter to you, maybe because your gender and your color of your skin we're never had a problem getting access to D&D, right? Like, and it feels really comfortable for you because you're there, right? And so the reality is, I do care about what gender and what the color of your skin is when you're creating D&D, because I think there's some real problems that need to be fixed. And I will say, I understand, like, there are a lot of people like, I don't want to talk about the entire world right now. It's like, I don't want to talk about politics in Dungeons and Dragons. And the reality is, like, I just did a video, right, about when does life begin, right? And the reason why is Dungeons and Dragons runs headlong into the most important questions that are of our society, right? And access to thought, ideas, and access to this incredible narrative engine, this incredible engine for human improvement that I believe Dungeons and Dragons is. If that upsets you, and you really, and you're just really going to get upset every time I talk about a middle-aged white man again, because it continues to happen, right? I understand your frustrations, but I just don't understand how you can talk about Dungeons and Dragons and divorce it and with this idea that you're going to completely divorce gender, and that you're going to divorce gender and the color of our skin from who's been able to create Dungeons and Dragons with lots and lots of access, and who hasn't, right? So I'm just kind of saying to you, if that upsets you, and I want to say this to everybody, I'm not holding anybody here, right? Like, I'm encouraging you to go find the material that you want to listen to, because I'm not going to drop this. When people ask me to speak about this and they're like, "Hey, I don't like the way you're talking about this," I'm always willing to listen, right? Because I know I'm really intense and adamant, and I need to be calm, clear, and concise when I talk, right? And I don't always do that. And I'm trying this year to really be calm, clear, and concise. But to me, you cannot divorce who's had all the access, like, not all, 90% of the access to create and design Dungeons and Dragons has been middle-aged white males, and it's a major problem. And I'm also upset that middle-aged white males are right now writing the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and my biggest issue with it is they are absolutely devastating the legacy of Lorraine Williams, and she was so upset by this by the time she died, that she would not take another interview from a middle-aged white male, because every single one who came to her sat, talked at her, smiled at her, and then castigated her and ruined her legacy, right? And so there's real, there's real stakes here, right? And so, so I hear you all, but this is what I'm hearing. I've been doing this 8 years, and if I see something important about D&D, I ain't gonna ever shut up about it, right? And I don't want you to be frustrated and bang your head against the wall. Go find content that echoes your ideas and that you're comfortable with, right? But the problem I have is people go and they get frustrated with these echo chambers, and they know, and they keep coming back because they know my content isn't an echo chamber, and it truly isn't. Yeah, I know for a fact. You certainly are not getting the best quality videos here as far as production values. There's not even a debate, right? But the reality is, I think the reason why people come and swear they're never going to hear another one of my listen to another one of my videos is they go left and they go right and they hear the same thing constantly. And I don't bore you with that, right? I don't bore you with ideas that have already been said on YouTube, and I'm not just another point in whatever echo chamber you're. And that's why a lot of people come back. So if you are coming back, right, and you're telling me I don't want to hear this, just understand I'm not trying to upset you. I'm being passionate about what I care about. So it's no attempt to upset anyone. It's just me trying to speak truth about Dungeons & Dragons. And I've been doing it for 8 years. And frankly, I don't think anybody does it in a more unique way than me, right? And I think it's one of the reasons why I continue to grow and why I have what I have, right? So, which is, I don't have some huge platform or something, but it's not small, right? And other people are trying to do the same thing, and I compete directly with them, and I think I'm doing good in comparison to them, right? So that's my take. So let's talk about theology and Dungeons & Dragons. Thank you for me going down that side road here. All right, so basically, you go into Dragonlance, which was written by. This is why we're talking about middle-aged white men right now. The project was led by Wesley Schneider, right? And this guy is exactly what I do not want in the Dungeons & Dragons design league. He's a middle-aged white man, right? Another one, right? And they gave Amanda Heyman the lead on Strixhaven. They gave Ajit George the lead on Radiant Citadel. Amanda Heyman crushed it. She dropped like a comet and just like did a Superman landing and just shattered. Like, Strixhaven is one of the biggest books in all Dungeons & Dragons history. Radiant Citadel was a complete nonsense book that is completely forgettable and probably will never come off my shelf again. It was just utterly useless because it did not present a single new magic item, a single new species, a single new spell, a single new vehicle, nothing. It had nothing for players. And frankly, no dungeon master worth their salt is going to run that book ever, in my humble opinion, right? So Ajit George failed. Amanda Heyman succeeded, right? Now Wesley Schneider walks in with his white male energy, right? Middle-aged white male energy. And he crushed it, man. He absolutely crushed it. He's like, shut your mouth, Scott. Watch this, right? Like, and Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen is one of the best books in history of Dungeons & Dragons. It is, and I'll tell you right now, that thing spiked Kryn into the ground and said, Dragonlance is here forever, right? Don't you think this is going to fall in the wayside like Al-Qadim, or fall in the wayside like Oriental's Adventures, or fall in the wayside like so many settings that are just gone and will never be seen again. I don't think they're ever going to print Dark Sun, right? And Wesley Schneider, with his middle-aged white male energy, he crushed it, man. This is an incredible book, right? So I get why. So I have to admit here, right? I understand why you hire some middle-aged white male. They do have the benefit of incredible, education, incredible language, incredible innovation, incredible creativity. Like Wesley Schneider is like, hey, you can question whether it is right to continue to hire us, but you can't question it on the merits, right? Like, we can definitely get it done. And so that's my point, is like, I talk against middle-aged white males being the design leads, but I'm gonna be truthful when I look at a book and go, oh my gosh, this is freaking one of the best books ever written in the history of Dungeons & Dragons. Then I see your point. There's we can't exile middle-aged white men from the D&D canon, creation teams, because sometimes they get it really, really right, and that's what F. Wesley Schneider did. It is an incredible book, and I keep opening up, Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, and just light shines out at my face like the Pulp Fiction suitcase, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this book is really good, right? Like, so I'm giving credit where credit's due, right? Like, definitely a middle-aged white man, but he definitely crushed it on this book, right? And he did not defeat Amanda Heyman, but he sure as heck defeated Ajit George, right? So here we go. All right, so what did he do that's so incredible? Well, there's 100 points, and I want to apologize to you because I've been just like everybody else. I've been jumping on this D&D 1.0, 1.1 stuff, and I really haven't been giving Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen the time that it needs, right? Because it's always going to be here, and I'm like, oh, I'm always going to be able to talk about it. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And so let's just talk about one amazing thing in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And that is Dragonlance's theology. So they have this incredibly detailed, incredibly compelling, incredibly attractive pantheon that is way better than anything Ed Greenwood ever wrote, right? And so they have good gods, and they have neutral gods, and they have evil gods, and they have gods that are set, and like their entire milieu is around the moons. But there's just this one thing when they describe the good deities of Dragonlance. They're like, hey, listen up, right? They're like, what? And it says, we want you to know that the good deities of Dragonlance are not out to eradicate the evil deities of Dragonlance, and the reason why is they want to preserve mortal choice. Right? I was like, wait, what? And I actually discussed this with my entire family because we're all Christians and we're all very deep into theology, and I was like, oh my gosh, these coastal elites up in designing Dungeons and Dragons are talking about what you and I are faced with every time we talk to a non-Christian. So what are we faced with when we talk to non-Christians, right? Well, I'll tell you right now what we're faced with, right? First, it never changes. They're like, how can you worship a God who allows evil in the world, right? And it's a harsh question, right? And we're like, and our answer is he's sovereign, he's perfect, and evil, the existence of evil brings him glory. He created a possibility where evil could reign. He gave mortals a choice between him, perfection, and evil, the devil. And Eve was like, I choose the devil. Give me that apple. And then her husband was like, yeah, I'll take a bite. And so basically we chose sin over perfection. And so he did create this world where evil was possible through our choice, right? Now people are like, that's not fair. God shouldn't be able to create evil. And here's the problem. Here's what you don't understand. He's perfect, he's sovereign, and he's worthy of glory. And if it takes evil in the world to bring him glory, that's the reality, right? But in order to get to the statement, the Dragonlance good gods do not eradicate the Dragonlance evil gods. They had to think, what was the reason why? And when they thought about this, they were facing the same question that I face when I, as an evangelical Christian, witness to people and say, you need to confess your sin. You need to ask Jesus Christ to save you, because if you don't, you will stand before the judgment throne, and you will have to show a perfect life to God. And without Jesus Christ, you won't be able to. But Jesus Christ died for you, and he will stand in front of you at the judgment throne if you have said, Jesus, I am a sinner. I need salvation. Please save me, right? And the reality is, and people are like, I'm not saying this because I'm not gonna worship a God that allowed evil, right? And so that exact question of why is evil in the world is right there at the center, at the first page of the Dragonlance pantheon. They're saying this is why the good gods have evil gods opposed to them, and why they have not eradicated them and removed evil from the world, because they want mortals to have choice, right? And as an evangelical Christian, I recognize it. I'm like, holy cows, man, you recognize that God put choice in this world. We got to choose him or we got to choose sin. We chose sin, and evil manifested. But God set up the system, right? Now, why is it okay for him to set up a system where evil exists? And this is the part where, F. Wesley Schneider, as a coastal elite, and I got to assume he's an atheist or an agnostic. And I don't need to, I don't need to reach for that. I don't think there's been an evangelical Christian working on Dungeons and Dragons since its inception. I don't think there has been one, right? So he's like, he thought incredibly deeply about theology. He asked the basic question: why does evil exist? Why? Right? And that's where you get to great Dungeons and Dragons, when you're asking IRL questions in the Dungeons and Dragons world, because Dungeons and Dragons is fundamentally, in my humble opinion, a IRL abstract iteration modeling system. We understand life better through Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is it only resonates. It only gongs when it's hit with the hammer, when it has the resonance of IRL. And I'll tell you, F. Wesley Schneider looked deep. He said, if we're going to talk about gods, we got to ask the question first: why is evil here? Right? F. Wesley Schneider, you crushed it, man. Like, I had deep theological discussions with my family discussing a D&D book, right? And you got it wrong, like on about 10%, maybe 20%. You missed that, you never said, hey, these Kryn gods are worthy of the glory that this choice brings, right? Because you can't. You can't understand, true theology, because you're lost. But the reality is, you ask some deep, deep questions. And F. Wesley Schneider, you did an incredible job on Dragonlance, and you really asked the most critical question of theology, and you just didn't get the full answer, right? But I'm so incredibly impressed with this Dragonlance book, and I'm really impressed with the Dragonlance theology that's in this. So that's what I wanted to present today. If you want to understand theology at a deep level and you want to do some exploration, Dragonlance, not D&D, just like fundamental core questions of theology are represented in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And there's a whole bunch of people that reviewed that book. And just like everybody, half the people, I would say 90% of the people who look at these D&D canon hardbacks, oh, how many points did you take to cut Goblin in half? Which to combat? Blah, 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 and just miss like how deep Dungeons and Dragons is, and just don't understand that exploration and interaction is the future. We're done with combat. It's finished, right? We're not getting rid of it. We're going to use the platform we built, but we need to build these complexities on the other side. All that's my humble opinion. I'm very eager to hear your humble opinion. Get in those comments. Send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.